Restricted stock is significantly different than stock options in several ways. One, very notably, is that the executive gets something that's actually has value right away, and that being the stock. And so whatever the market value of the stock is, that's the value the executive or the employee has immediately, as opposed to a stock option. It's typically worthless right away. It only has value if the stock rises relative to the issuing price or the exercise price of the option. So that's significant. But when we're looking at the accounting for restricted stock as opposed to stock option, it is also significantly different in how we account for it. One, when we had the stock option, we had to come up with some sort of a fair value of that option, and that's a guess at best as to what that thing is worth over the service period. And when you look at restricted stock, there's no argument as to what the value is of the stock when you issue it or give this sort of a compensation package to your employees. It's the market value of the stock at the point of the grant date. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead on the date we actually grant the restricted stock to the employees and make a journal entry. We didn't with stock options. We made no entry right away. And so for restricted stock, we're going to make an entry right away, and that entry is going to be total whatever the compensation expense is for the restricted stock. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is calculate the total compensation expense, and that's simply going to be the number of shares issued, which in this case is 5 million, times not the par value, but this is going to be multiplied by whatever the fair value of the stock is at the date of grant, which is $12 a share. So my compensation expense for this restricted stock is 5 million times the $12 per share. So $60 million is the total compensation expense. However, that is not recognized immediately, the entire amount, because logically the employees haven't earned it yet. So on the date of grant, here's what we're going to do. This is January 1st of 2016. We're going to debit this account called unearned compensation, and we'll debit that for the value we've calculated down here. And we're going to go ahead and pretend as though the common stock has been issued. It has been, it's just maybe restricted, so maybe it's not in the hands of the executive or the employee yet. You put in the common stock account the number of shares you're issuing, which is 5 million, times the par value per share. So it's $5 million. And the difference goes to paid in capital in excess of par. And so that's for $55 million. One point I want to note here is this the unearned compensation account. This is what we would call a contra equity account. This is not an asset account. It is not a liability account. It's an amount we're offsetting this equity, but the logic is that we want to show this equity as issued because it dilutes the current owner's shares, their value, and we haven't really issued it yet because it's restricted. So it sits in this equity account, contra equity account, called unearned compensation expense. So that's how you would figure out, one, how much is the total compensation for these restricted shares, and then two, how do you initially account for that transaction, assuming you are the issuing organization.